Okay, welcome back, folks. We are now going to take up our oversight and accountability section for the week, and we're looking at a couple of different things. We're getting an update on Reach Ahead, and there was language. And why am I getting these things here now? Sorry, there's language. My iPad is doing things. There was language in, I'm going to remember, I think 24.
Yeah,
Yeah,
2020, calendar year 23.
Yes.
Fiscal year
for
24.
24. And we're going to be taking a look at the Reach Ahead portion in particular. Okay. So welcome, Deputy Commissioner. And we have Melissa. Is that right? Hi, Melissa. Welcome. Yeah, if there's another chair there, you can scoot up a chair. We'll do quick introductions since Melissa, this is your first time with us.
Oh, great.
Representative Nielsen and Representative Steady are both listening in online. So I'm Teresa Wood. I'm from Waterbury, and I also serve Bolton, Dual and Huntington.
I am Ray Garofano. I serve Essex and Essex Junction.
Lily McGowan, I represent Bridgeport, Middlebury, and live in Woodbridge.
Hello, I'm Esme Cole of Hartford.
Hi, I'm Zon Eastis. I serve Guilford and Vernon.
Doug Bishop, representing Colchester's Chittenden 20 district.
Hi, good afternoon, Eric McGuire, Rutland City.
Yes.
I thought he was. It's Dan Donahue. I'm not Dan Noyes. And I'm from Northfield, also represent Berlin.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dan Noyes. I represent Wolcott, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
Lori?
Lori Marks, Community Assistant. Harlan Molitor, Gig Factions.
Matt Levin, Executive Director of the Vermont Early Child Advocacy.
Great. So welcome. Thank you both for being here this afternoon. And we have been asking for an update about Reach Up, Reach Ahead, and looking at the language and the follow-up from that, and what the department's plans are for the future. So thank you both for being here.
Yes. So for the record, Miranda Grimm, the Deputy Commissioner of the Economic Services Division, and with me I have Melissa Bokash, who is the Benefits Program Administrator for the Reach Up program. Yeah, we did send a document. I'm hoping that you.
Yes, it is on our webpage. And can you describe for me, just like in the sort of chart, organizational chart, where Aaron Olikin and how Melissa and Aaron relate?
Yes, absolutely. So Aaron Olikin is the director in outside of state government in some positions. Melissa would be like the assistant director. So she is the second in command for the program.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No, that's a great title.
I'm used to seeing Aaron, and I know she's out on medical leave, as I understand it. Yeah.
Yes. So that.
Happy to have you, Melissa.
I'm glad we were able to figure out whatever snafu we had, so that we were happy to be here with you all today. We thought we would just start with the Reach Up program's mission and vision. So we join families on their journey to overcome obstacles, explore opportunities, improve their finances, and reach their goals. Our vision is families are empowered, connected, and thriving. And we've had this mission and vision for several years. It dates back to when I was actually in Melissa's position in the Reach Up program. So we also thought it would be helpful to just level set. I know that you've heard from a number of folks, and there's some questions, and maybe even circulating through the building, about how Reach Up is funded, where that money goes, and then how that ties into Reach Ahead. So I promise it all relates. But just to kind of level set, Reach Up is Vermont's TANF program. It predates me significantly.
We have new members who might not understand all of the alphabet soup.
Okay. So Reach Up is Vermont's temporary assistance to needy families program, and that's the federal. So TANF is the federal name, and Vermont has named that Reach Up. It has had other iterations, other names in the past, but that is what it goes by now. We actually have quite a bit of alphabet soup you'll see here in a slide or two. So I will be happy. Please let me know if I'm doing that too much, and I'm happy to dive in. TANF is a block grant. So we have, for decades at this point, have received the same amount of funding from the federal government. And then Vermont is very generous and has also put in a lot of general fund into this, understanding that the block grant hasn't increased. And at this point, we aren't sure that it will. The TANF block grant has been used for a variety of purposes. Specifically, a portion of the grant goes to support the Family Services Division, primarily funding social worker positions and salaries. Another portion goes to the Child Development Division, mainly for childcare subsidies. And then part of it also, it does stay here in the Reach Up program. And then some of it does a swap with the tax department. That's around the earned income tax credit, which allows for more flexibility in spending. And the federal government tells us that we need to have some maintenance of effort funds. Everything that we are doing here in Vermont is, Vermont is turned to as one of the states of like, you're using your block grant appropriately. And these are investments that have been made, like we said, for decades at this point, and really entangled in those systems. I know when I was at the Child Development Division, it was understanding, kind of like how was this money coming over to TANF? And I think the premise at the time was that, we want to be supporting some of Vermont's most vulnerable children that would be touching each of these systems. So those that are on Reach Up also are engaged with the Child Development Division when their children are engaged either with childcare. Well, they're engaged in other ways with Child Development Division, but I don't want to confuse matters. And then also understanding that there are touch points with family services as well.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So this shows the is it the blue or the green? It's the blue. All right. So this shows like almost $2.9 million of federal money going into the TANF, the Reach Up benefits. How much do we get in total dollars for TANF that then is split up into these other areas?
Do you remember off the top of your head the total block grant?
47.5 million, I believe.
47.5 million. So it's, I mean, the majority is going to these other places, which are all benefiting families. I understand that. I'm just curious why we don't put some of the general fund. Does it enable us to draw down other federal funds by using TANF?
Right, it's the swap, it's earning maintenance of effort. And essentially like for this federal program, we have a work participation rate that has to be met. If you don't meet it, then there can be fines, which would then lower or decrease our block grant. So Vermont came up with a number of ways to be able to ensure that we were going to meet our work participation rates so that we would continue to get a full block grant.
Go ahead.
Can you explain maintenance of effort?
That one I might need to come back. Thank you, Rep. Donahue. That one I might have to come back with more business office, but there's essentially, and jump in, please. Eligible activities, eligible expenditures where we can put that money. So like the earned income tax credit, those are where we can swap funds, and in doing that, we get special funds. And so it's essentially like we're earning credits towards our work participation rate. And there's a number of ways. We've had a contract with the Boys and Girls Club. I don't know for how many decades there as well. And that is like, it's supporting children. And that is something that the federal government has said is allowable. That's high level.
One other question. So as far as the percentages and the amounts that are going in the various programs that are not like direct cash assistance to families, like how often is that reviewed by the department? I understand the business office is doing things to make sure that we're maximizing all the federal funding and meeting all the requirements, but how often are you looking to see, like, I'm kind of thinking Act 76 childcare, we have this big investment for childcare. Like, are we still needing money from TANF to be directed to childcare subsidies? So just wondering, like, how often is that evaluated by the department?
So I would say the business office would come to us and say like, hey, you have extra money here that we don't need. But I think the evaluation, to your point, and this actually is going to be a beautiful segue into the Reach Ahead program, is right. We did build systems at a time, thinking like we're understanding how it was beneficial for everyone. There have been significant investments into childcare, and now we know that those on Reach Up are eligible for the benefit. Maybe not always true, and being able to provide, some extra cushion when people are not eligible for Reach Up. So I haven't been a part of any conversations of saying like, okay, let's look at this whole system, but it's also understanding, you pull on one thread and then you end up with a whole lot more than you had anticipated. But I think it's certainly worthy of a conversation to just understand there have been investments in the child development division. Does that change anything? Is that a part of like, do we need to be making that swap to earn certain effort, maintenance of effort funds? Just kind of what would the domino effect be? And honestly, I think just because of the timing of, things happening with childcare, the pandemic, I know that in my time and then other programs that I oversee, we haven't been able to do that deep dive.
Thank you.
Doug, did you have a question?
No, sorry, I didn't see his hand.
All set. Thank you.
So next, I thought it would just be helpful to understand kind of what's encompassed when we say Reach Up. There are actually 5 different programs within that. So we have our traditional Reach Up program that helps parents and caretakers to set goals. And with the goal ultimately being like, how do we increase your education or your training skills to help people become financially independent? Then we also have Reach First, which is more of a diversion program. And so this was if someone maybe didn't have a paid parental leave, this could be an option where you could get all of your 4 months worth of benefits at one time. And so it would just provide that bridge. Or if you knew that you were going to be out of work for some other reason for a very specific time, Reach First could be a program for you. We also offer the post-secondary education program, which will help adults with either getting their associates or their bachelor's, and being able to do that for 2 or 4 years. We have the Reach Up Child Only grants. So this is really for caretakers that don't have necessarily a need for themselves. So it's for relatives or friends of the family that are taking care of children. And then we have the Reach Ahead program. And I'm going to talk specifically about the pilot program, but then we'll kind of give you a little history on why Reach Ahead, which I believe Rep. Donahue had done when this came up earlier. So the Reach Ahead pilot program, the reason we're here today, this was enacted July 1st of 2023. The pilot ends on June 30th of this year. This program was again for those who are transitioning out of our Reach Up or our post-secondary education programs. And in state fiscal year 24, there were about 373 households that were served in this program each month. A little bit of the history of Reach Ahead and the work participation rate. So historically, families receiving Reach Ahead benefits, and there's a slide where I'll be able to show you how this is working now, has accounted for a large portion of the state's work participation rate. The WPR, which is the work participation rate, is our federal performance measure, and it assesses the percentage of Reach Up recipients engaged in approved work activities. So there's a list of work activities the federal government has said that people can engage in, and we have a responsibility to report that to our federal partners. The Reach Ahead, the original Reach Ahead program, was created in 2009 to help us to meet the federal work requirement. So we have had a few years in the past where we were not meeting the work participation rate. And as I said, there can be penalties, fiscal penalties, for not meeting your work participation rate, which in turn would mean lesser benefits for those that we are trying to serve.
Are you seeing any changes in those work participation rates being proposed by the current administration? In other words, increasing the percentage required or any, particular changes?
So I don't think specifically for the work participation rate of changes, but we know that there are specifically to the Reach Ahead program, there are some changes that they're looking to make including like you have to have a certain level of a benefit that will have to be issued in order for it to count, to ensure that states are investing their funding appropriately. But we are monitoring closely. There is potential federally, we have some, now I'm trying to not use alphabet soup, chair, SSBG.
Social Services Block Grant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There is conversation at the federal level of having that be reduced. And so we have looked at like, okay, what would that mean? And first, we haven't done a deep dive because it is, once again, those are funds that are going into family services, the child development, and stay with us. But with so much going on federally, we are making sure that we are, as much as we can, because there have been some changes as well. Our Boston office was closed, and that was who we had a lot of contact with. So we're waiting to see who will be our new contacts when we have questions. But we are monitoring and trying to stay in as close touch as we can when we have the appropriate new contacts.
And how do you receive information about proposed changes? Is it from people, like national associations monitoring what's happening, or are you receiving direct correspondence from the federal administration yet on any of these, sort of potential things that may or may not happen? Or are you getting updates from, professional advocacy organizations? How are you monitoring this?
I think it was all three up until recently, with our regional office having been closed.
Mhm.
So that is not an avenue that we have right now, but we do have professional organizations who are tracking this closely. But as I said, we're waiting to see, and I don't know if we've gotten an update.
We're hoping maybe tomorrow at one of those professional advocacy groups that we could potentially get a little more information, but currently we do not have any new contacts at the federal level since the Boston.
We're kind of left in limbo right now. Close the office, lay off the people,
Yeah,
no contact.
we weren't even informed that they were
Closing. You heard it in the news like everybody else did. Yeah. And still no correspondence from the federal government that they've closed. Interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Representative Bishop.
So looking here, if Reach Ahead has historically been instrumental in us reaching our work participation rate. And if I understood what you said earlier, Reach Ahead will be concluding come June. Does that leave us at risk of hitting our work participation rate?
Reach Ahead's not
That's what's
including.
Yeah, it was confusing from that original chart. I was going to ask a question, but then you explained, because it said, this is Reach Ahead, and then it said 2025.
The pilot.
And that's
So we-
just,
Okay, an extension of Reach Ahead in a pilot. Okay,
Yes, I'm sorry. It will.
thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate, sorry for the confusion. Yes, so no matter, we still have a Reach Ahead program. There was a pilot that gave some enhancements that I will
Gotcha.
share.
Thank you.
I think another important information piece is that the Reach Ahead program is based upon the number of hours worked, not necessarily the wages received. And that comes into play. I know that you heard from others about how it is challenging sometimes for people to be able to get into the Reach Ahead program. And again, I would reflect on at the time that this was developed, wages were not as high as we're seeing now since the pandemic. A lot of participants that leave the Reach Ahead program are going into customer service positions. And I think we did see during the pandemic that those wages increased because employers needed to be able to draw people into that working in person. And we've always also had a historical problem of certain positions of, like you only get so many hours, certain entities. But so I think that is the key factor of what I know that you heard about is like, sometimes it is hard now, and that could be like you are no longer eligible for Reach Up, but you might not quite get enough hours to be eligible for Reach Ahead. But there is a look back period. So for single parents, that would mean 20 hours a week. For 2-parent households, but only one parent is able to work, that's 30 hours a week. And for 2-parent households where they both have an ability to work, that's 35 hours.
And those are federal rules.
Correct.
Okay. And those numbers haven't changed.
They have not.
Okay.
Another important piece is to know it is a program that can only be used once in a person's lifetime. So in the original program, it didn't have to be consecutive. So someone could be on Reach Up or mostly I'll just stick with, they could be on Reach Up, they get a job, they go into Reach Ahead, something happens, they come back on to Reach Up for several years, they could go back on to Reach Ahead. And once you take your 24 months, then the program won't be done. So there's slight differences with what happened within the pilot. But no household can receive more than 24 months. So then we've had some of the changes. And I know this is also discussed about why did benefit levels change. So when it was first implemented, it was a 12-month program. So someone would get a food benefit for $100 for the first 6 months and then $50 for the next 6 months. And then in 2015, the Reach Ahead program was changed. The assistance went from 12 months to 24 months. And then within the first 6 months after leaving Reach Up and PSE, families would be eligible for $50 for 12 months and then $5 for the remaining 12 months.
It's PSC and,
Post-secondary education.
oh, okay, all right, thank you.
Sorry, no, my apologies.
And I'm recalling this, and the $5 was so they would continue, because people say $5, what's that for? That was so they would be continued to be eligible for other services, as I recall.
Yep, so you would get childcare subsidy for an additional 12 months, which used to be, to your point, Representative, like that used to be a really big deal for people, is to be able to get that second year of childcare. Even when we were getting such a low benefit, the benefit to the state was then we were able to count people in our work participation rate for a whole second year. So that was really important. In 2023, the Reach Ahead pilot program was implemented. And this was a slight change. So then we had, from the original to this pilot, is within the first 12 months after leaving Reach Up or PSC. So this is, 6 months versus 12 months. And then the benefit was once again increased up to $100 for 6 months. And then it went down to $50 for the remaining 18 months. So, right, we like to keep things interesting. Yes, a lot of tweaks. Another big change here was the pilot offered guaranteed work incentives. So if you stayed employed for 6 months, you get $750. At 12 months, you get $1,000. At 18 months, you get $1,000. At 24 months, you would get another $1,000. And these are different. In the previous versions of Reach Ahead, you were still eligible for support services. And so that could be help with car repairs. Maybe you needed some new training equipment, an outfit for work, those kind of expenses we would be able to potentially help support you with.
So just to summarize, in the pilot program, it upped the amount that you got for food benefit, and then it provided work incentive payments. I mean, that's essentially what the content of the pilot part was. Yes? Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Doug. Thank you.
For the guaranteed work incentives and those markers, 6, 12, 18, and 24 months, is there any requirement that it be with the same employer or just that you were employed?
There'd be no break in employment. You could have to stay,
But no break.
no break, so you'd have to.
So I think to your question, Representative Bishop, about the work participation rate. So we wanted to give a visual, and as you can see, for our all families rate, we even without Reach Ahead, we meet that work participation rate. For our 2-parent, it's a significant difference. So this is a part of our assessment as we look at this program, is understanding like, okay, there is a benefit to families, though in what we will be reverting back to on July 1st, there isn't that big of a benefit, or there isn't that big of a difference. We will meet even by, it's like 6 percentage points. We meet that target that the feds have set for us, but we don't meet it for our 2 parents. And so that is something that we are looking at and understanding. But as we pointed out, the Reach Ahead program isn't going anywhere, it stays. But it was just to give a sense of what it is giving us.
Will you help interpret this graph for me? And then Representative McGill has a question. So is the work participation rates, that's the line. So the work participation, that's a mouthful. It's WPR. It's the WPR, 4% and then 42%, is that?
So for those two groups, those are the targets. And then the bar graphs are showing you, so for our all families, without reach ahead included, we're at 10%. But with the reach ahead included, then we get up to 41.2%. And then the same thing for the two parent calculation. And that's where you can see without reach ahead, we don't meet that 42% target. With reach ahead, we do.
Okay, I see.
But this doesn't touch on the pilot at all. It's just talking about reach ahead,
Right, it's just talking about reach ahead. Because,
which is not changing.
correct.
Okay, sorry.
Right, as the chair mentioned, like the pilot really just gave, here's a larger income and here are guaranteed, I wouldn't say that it was called bonuses. Work support payment, sorry, that does matter. The wording matters federally. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Representative
Sorry,
Gill.
yes, I'm
Sorry, thank you.
I was just wondering if you got like jumped a little bit more into the two parent data and were able to break it down at all. I see like there's kind of two options for the two parents, like two parents, one able to work and then two parents both able to work. And I was just wondering if you had data and kind of just
If there's any differences in the data.
I'm just wondering if there was any significant differences. And if that like presents an opportunity of,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're doing the like, no, we're gonna need to go back and look. And I think a part of it is like, we're wanting to look into this to understand, like we had a pilot and we have learned some things from that. And then it is also a program that we hadn't really done a lot of other exploration with, understanding that other pieces of things that used to be a pretty big incentive have changed. So yeah, we're gonna continue.
Go ahead, Representative Eustace.
So can you speak for a minute about the 4% and the 42%? I mean, is there a justification or those are federal markers you're guided toward? They're somewhere markedly different. What's it's just,
I don't.
it's just a marker.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question in the same area. The only thing I could speculate is if it's all families, is that largely, and you have another column for two parent, would that be a single parent? And there's a presumption of a need to provide childcare, but there's a childcare benefit. So
There's also within the program, you can have what's called a young child deferment, so that people do have the ability to be able to stay home and bond with their child, if that's what
okay.
makes the most sense.
So, a couple slides back, you talked about the three categories, the 20 hours for single parents, 30 hours for two parents, one to work, and then 35 for two parents, both able to work. It seems like it would be more helpful to see this graph broken out by those categories, since that's what the work requirements are.
And I can see if we have that ability to be able to pull it out in that way.
Yeah.
I think because how we reported up to the feds, right, we were able to just kind of put everything, this was an exercise by me asking for like, can you show us what Reach Ahead does? And so I think but I will ask certainly my team, like, can we look and see like what portion, because what you're wanting to see is what portion of the single parents, the two parents, one able to work, one not.
Well, is that how you would have to report it?
I would need to check into I don't do that.
If there's if the work requirements are those three things, then I would think that you would have to report those three categories.
They are like the all families, I think pulls them all together, and the two parents, that is how we have to report on them, as the all families. We don't report on it based on those categories.
You don't.
So the
Okay.
families is nested inside the whole
Yeah.
families. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And so there's no separate thing for single parents. You don't report separately for single parents.
I wonder what the,
But then they don't ask for reporting. That seems very strange. And so that this graph that you have up what I'm trying to determine is, do these numbers look the same? These percentages look the same? With or without the pilot?
What impact did the pilot have on these percentages?
So the pilot gave the ability to look back further. So people that had exited Reach Up or post-secondary education up to 12 months previously to be able to get into it. So there could be a difference there, but otherwise, like there isn't. Like if you were eligible for Reach Ahead pre-pilot, you were
Yeah.
eligible for Reach Ahead post-pilot or during the pilot. And the same thing as we transition back, when the pilot ends, those that are eligible for Reach Ahead will get into Reach Ahead.
Right, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about whether or not it further assisted in meeting the work requirements
Or
by
were more
providing-
people actually, did they keep their jobs
longer.
longer, or did they retain their employment? Did Reach Ahead pilot impact employment retainment for participants, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah, and the ability, so like with this number shows it with and without Reach Ahead, but I just didn't know if the numbers would be the same with and without use of the pilot.
Right. Well, and I think we'll get into, I think some of what you're asking is if a scientific methodology had been applied to the pilot, right? Then you would have had a control group and then you had those in the pilot and then we would have seen where their difference is. Because right now what we can't determine is, would people have stayed in this regardless of the pilot or not? We don't have evidence that says that one way or another. And so all we can say is like that these folks would have been eligible either way. If there was a pilot or no pilot.
They'd have still been eligible for Reach Ahead.
Correct.
Yeah.
They just got
Enhanced.
They're just in the pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah, for this time period.
for this time period.
Yeah, so we'd
Yeah.
have to look at earlier data to see the
Mhm.
differences. Yeah.
And all good questions though, because we have a couple more months left of this and the opportunity to look and to be able to say like, can we see,
Mhm.
like during this and then pre-pilot. But understanding like sometimes that isn't apples to apples because of the economy and how things have changed.
Right, and I guess what you're also telling us is that you didn't continue in the governor's budget. You didn't continue the pilot beyond this initial 2 years, or I think it was 2 years. It's hard for us to tell whether or not, if we were to try to figure out, was it effective or should it be retained? It's other than saying it's always good for low-income families to have more income. I mean, that's an obvious. It doesn't necessarily help us. And I'll be clear, we probably need to be more specific about outcomes in the establishing legislation. So, okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Nope. You just mentioned the legislation, so we just captured it here of what was put into law. And I think you're right. It is always hindsight. I think there is some other outcome measures. I wasn't with the division at the time. Are there other markers that we could have been looking at? But I think there is still some opportunity to see what information might be out there. This is just comparison. So you can see the Reach Ahead pilot versus what it was pre-pilot and what we will be transitioning back to on July 1st. And so that is.
Yeah, I'm going to ask mine first. So you kind of skimmed over section E 323.8 on the previous slide, which talks about reporting data and measuring outcomes for participants and indicators used to measure participant and pilot program progress, et cetera, unless you're going to be getting to that. I mean, we've got cost information and all of that kind of stuff, but, what is it that you determined, because it doesn't say exactly, sort of left latitude up the department to determine the indicator used to measure participant and pilot program. So how are we to determine whether or not the pilot program was successful or not, or whether it should be continued or not?
the surveys were what were determined to be used. And so that unfortunately isn't very scientific, but we do have data from participants who engaged in this program. And I think, as you had mentioned, yes, it is always helpful to give more money, but to have concrete. And I think this is part of why you would see, I didn't have information to be able to say like, yes, this is really strong, but we are now looking at what information do we have? What ability do we have to be able to see, is it impacting? Did Reach Ahead, the pilot, impact our numbers more or not? So that we can make an informed decision about what we would want to put forward into the future.
Well, I mean, for instance, I'm pretty sure you can probably tell someplace in that data about whether or not we have any, the number or percentage of Reach Up families who are homeless versus the number of Reach Ahead pilot families who are homeless. And so it would seem like having an extra, $1,000 a month would make a difference in whether or not you were able to retain housing, for instance. I mean, are those the kinds of things that you asked in your survey?
Essentially, yes. Like, how did the work support payment help impact your family? What did you use your work support payments for? Those type of things. Like, would you have stayed on the program and such were on the survey? And they got a survey after each time they received an incentive. They got a survey.
Okay, so I mean, I see you give us like, not too much detail about the survey, but if you could follow up with, the survey, a copy of the survey itself and what the questions were and kind of, some sort of summary of what the analysis was, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Do you have information on what percentage of folks complete 2 years of Reach Ahead? And then what percentage, like compare that to folks that are doing the pilot? So to see like, is the complete, like being in the program for the full 2 years, is that great increase by being in Reach Ahead pilot and having that extra incentive?
I think then you would be doing it a little bit of like, you would have to compare to pre-pilot because there wasn't a group that got into the pilot at the same time as a group that did not. It wasn't run in that way. So it would be looking at pre-pilot.
So do I understand that, let's say folks that were in the pilot, in the program prior, then when the pilot sounds like it's a name for a program that just got layered over those folks that were already in the program. And all those same people now are in this pilot. So it wasn't adding a new cohort to measure or anything, a separate group of people. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, you should just be comparing old data to new data to understand what effects the pilot program had. See.
Yeah, okay.
Is there
Go ahead.
data on how many people made it through, how many started in the pilot and how many made it through the 4 work incentive payments?
Yes, but we haven't completed all the work. The last work support payment would be June 30th, or would be June.
So there's
data.
a report out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know who hasn't completed all of those. Any idea about the
number of people that haven't,
who have
we have
dropped?
to get that. We have to look and get that back.
Okay, so these, sure Monica's writing all these things down.
Got it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I think I have pretty much said most of this, so I won't, unless there are questions.
I just want to correct, because I misspoke. I said 1,000 per month. It's not 1,000 per month. It's 1,000 after, one time after each.
Right.
So I just want to make sure I didn't mislead anybody.
So we did include the costs. So this is In fiscal year 23, the allocation was 116,860 and it served about 253 families. And then the pilot, which is 2 years, was $2 million for the pilot, and an allocation of $226,203. We also had 3 new limited service positions, 2 case managers to help provide this increased caseload that there was going to be potentially if people stayed on more consecutively, and then an assistant administrator that worked out of central office. And the Reach Ahead family served was 348.
I don't know what allocation means.
So the money that was given to us for the program. So it was, a little more than, oh, I'm not doing my math right. I was going to say 100. Yeah, a little over $100,000. And then the 2 million was given to us to operate the program.
And what's the allocation of 226,000? I'm not,
It's the, oh, sorry, I won't answer, but.
yeah, could we let the
Yes.
witness answer? Yeah. That's okay. That's all right.
So the 226, that was for the regular allocation. That was the budgeted amount for Reach Ahead to cover the pilot was kind of the 2 million was for the additional work support payments and to cover the additional administrative costs in the 2 case manager and 1 assistant administrator positions.
And so you're saying your regular Reach Ahead allocation is 200 in 2023 was 116,000 and in 2024 it was 226.
And that was based off the caseload projections.
Okay.
So do I understand then that out of the $2 million that for the pilot, subtracted from that $2 million would be the salaries for 2 case managers and the assistant administrator. And then whatever amount that was, that amount of money was then used to fund an extra 80 families in the program. The previous year, there were 253 or almost 100, almost 100, it looks like 100 extra families. Am I reading that correctly?
That the allocation would have covered a lot of the regular reach up.
Oh, the
benefits,
allocation
but
would have
the 2
covered-
million was for the additional work
100 or
support
so.
payments.
Yes, okay. Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and can you confirm that all of that will be expended and out the door to families by the end of the pilot? So like, will all of the 2 million, cash for the families, for the extra tiered payments and the administrative costs, like will that all go out the door by the end of the pilot? Are you expending all of it?
It doesn't look at this point that we will hit that $2 million marker, no.
So can you share how much you'll not spend?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head, but I can.
It'll be part of the report,
Right.
June 30th report.
So I'm just curious, so sorry, follow up. So I'm wondering why would you, was there any consideration to extending the program by the amount of money that you have left? Because it doesn't sound like you've spent all of it, so wondering why you didn't consider extending it, given that you haven't spent all of it.
I don't know that we have data that says that this program, exactly as it was run, should continue to run. And part of that is we were continuing to gather that information. We had gone through year 1, well, not even a complete year 1, when AHS is building its budget and when DCF. So that process, begins very early. It's this time of year that we start building what we would want to put forward. So needing to have information about a program. We have learned more, but either way, we would have had to, the language said that the pilot ends. So we would need to have had a strong case for why we would need to continue this. And would the money that we had left, which would have been hard for us to know at that point, been enough to carry it for another year? Or would I have needed extra funds? It isn't just a matter of being able to just say, I think maybe it's going to happen. We now have more information.
Sorry, can I follow up? Do you feel like you have the information now that am I hearing that now you feel that the program has been successful and like you have evidence that it's a good program and we should continue it? It was just a timing thing, or are you still saying that you don't have data to support the continuation of the program?
I'm saying at this point, I do not have data.
Okay.
Where I would say that this was successful. We have responses from the surveys, but that isn't.
But isn't that the only thing you're doing for the
That was-
evaluation of the program is the surveys?
That was the only thing I think there are in what I have requested, like what other information is out there. I think that's a number of the questions that you have asked. We have some ability to be able to, we need to go and understand what we can understand. There's some things we are never going to know because there wasn't a control group. But to be able to determine, like, was this program helpful? Should it be continued just as it was? Or are there components of this that would be really helpful to be able to look at, changing the Reach Ahead program, evolving? As we know, like the childcare piece isn't probably the incentive anymore. So what does that mean? What changes could there be? Is there the length of time that has ebbed and flowed over time too? So I think there are more, and as we said, like we have to finish the pilot and then be able to have time to gather this information.
What happens to a family who enters the pilot, on May 1st? They have 6 months, 12 months, 18-month payments. And you haven't expended the funds, why wouldn't you do them? So that doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, we have strong notices and stuff that the pilot does end 6:30, so everybody's received. All of our notices state that no work support payments would go out after 6:30. So that if somebody on May 1st would roll into regular Reach Ahead 7/1, but they would not get the additional work support payments in the Reach Ahead pilot benefits. And we've had a pretty robust process of sharing that information out with both current and participants as they come on the program.
So literally the only families who would get the full benefit of the pilot would be those who enrolled on day one. And not even on day one, because I'm pretty sure you probably weren't accepting applications on day one, July 1. It was probably August or September before it got rolling. So it doesn't seem like it's even possible that anybody would have received the 24-month payment.
We were able to enroll people by July 1. So we do have about 100 families, I believe, that will get the, I don't have the exact number. We'd have to get that.
So about a third of the families will get the full 24 months. So we would like to know how much of this you would expect to expend, and then how much it would cost to continue the full pilot payment, for the full benefit payment for people to reach the end of it. So even if we were to not enroll anybody else, what would it cost for the families to receive the benefit of the pilot for the 6, 12, 18, and 24 months? So how much would that cost for those families that would be beyond June 30th? Okay. And then how does that compare to what it is that you believe you'll have left available? So we see if there's any difference.
And one more question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So can you confirm in the administration's proposal in the budget, whatever was not being spent, what is happening to that?
My understanding is that those funds revert back, right? Because they were specific. You're welcome. This breaks down the cost per household. I think of note is that the state fiscal 25 year is significantly more, because that is when you start to see those larger work support payments. Sorry, I'm like still struggling with that one too.
Is that per month, per what, per year?
Per case, cost per case.
Oh, to process the funding. Yeah.
This is the cost per case per month in that year.
Okay, it just doesn't say per month.
Okay.
Yes, no, understood. Always good questions that make us see that it's not as explanatory as we had hoped.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We did send out 256 surveys in state fiscal year 24, and 114 of those surveys were returned.
Pretty good.
That is pretty good. And so we did hear, and I know you heard that earlier, you know, that people are self-reporting that the bonuses had a positive impact. And we are continuing to get these surveys in state fiscal 25.
Question about the surveys. What was the nature of the questions to measure that positive impact? Was it with this extra money, it allowed you to do, check all that apply, or were they open-ended questions?
Mixture of both. Some were to be able to pull the data, some were more of like a check all that would apply, and then some did give opportunity for participants to share there.
I think we've already talked about some of the limitations. Talked about when it will end. We are going to analyze the data that we collected both from year one, and then we'll get to the end of year two. We know that there are at least one federal change of, it looks like our $5 benefit won't be something that would count into the work participation rate into the future. So we're also looking at that and what that change would need to be. And as you can see, the cost per case has been pretty significant, that increase. And so we need to look at, is that the place to invest the funding, or is there another avenue that we could do to support families?
Other questions? So I just so isn't any misunderstanding, we'd need to get the information about the expected balance remaining and the expected number of families who will not have received the full benefit of participating in the pilot and how much that would cost. We would need that by the first of next week.
And can you also send us a copy of the survey that?
Yeah, that was in addition to that. No, I'm sorry. I knew Monica had gotten it. Yeah, the survey and the survey results. Other questions?
Just, you mentioned, I think that you've already sent out notices. Can you also send a copy of the notice that folks received?
All right.
Oh, I have one more. So-
Yeah, sorry. Go for it. Go for it. That's why they're here.
Reach up is my thing. So, just kind of thinking about, we passed legislation about reducing the rateable reduction, and kind of thinking about this population of individuals that are very low income and can certainly use these funds, and it could sometimes help them, avoid homelessness or eviction or things of that nature. So, I'm taking from this that this program has been successful. So like putting more money in people's pockets who are poor is helpful. How did the bill that we passed around reducing the rateable reduction, were there any conversations that were connected the success of this program to reducing the rateable reduction, to kind of, because the bill was for the department to come back with a plan to reduce the rateable reduction. So we can put more money in the families' pockets. So just wondering, is the department having any of those conversations?
So I guess I wouldn't say that what we've presented here says that this program was successful. I think we don't know that, because when we look at what our successes would be, like, did people get increased wages? Did they stay successfully employed the 2 years? That's information that we need to understand. And then the report you were talking about, it was just how would this happen? So it wasn't an implementation. To be clear, the department isn't implementing. How do we look at increasing, decreasing the rateable? It was just, here is how that would work. And that report was submitted when it needed to be, but that it was that. I think we're always looking at, what would be helpful for Vermonters, but it has to be balanced with where do we have funding, and understanding that even just inside of economic services, there's a significant amount of funding that are going to certain programs over others.
Any other questions? Thank you both for being here. It's nice to meet you, Melissa. Thank you, and appreciate the information and the follow-up. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Okay, folks, so tomorrow morning, we are going to pick up with witnesses on H46 on the Rare Disease Advisory Council. They're also going to vote out in the morning, whenever it comes our way. It might not be 11:30, it might be before then, but we're going to vote out S36 and just have a number of witnesses. And then on H46, and after floor, we're going to start on another bill, H248, Representative Gregoire's bill, an act relating to the childcare grants and some follow-up on that.
Oh, it's reminding me in terms of bills that I saw something in 7 Days or BT Digger about that childcare licensing certification for home providers,
Yeah,
that they're,
in the Senate.
it's in the Senate, and they're planning to tag it on a bill so that it meets crossover. So it may be coming here for us to have to look at, because it's going to be on, it didn't say what bill, but they were quoted as saying they're going to put it on some vehicle.
And it will go downstairs and down and across the way. It's not downstairs anymore, I guess. It's going to go to GovOps first, and then it will come here.
All righty, you already know. A lot of times we don't know before the press knows.
Yeah,
but-
no,
So,
I actually didn't know that it was getting tacked on to another bill. We are just prepared for anything on that particular bill.
Yep.
I don't know what it currently has in it or what it might come over with, but it required a significant expansion at the Secretary of State's office, and there's a considerable amount of testimony to be taken on that bill. Let's just put it that way.
yes, I would think so.
I would agree.
From what I've heard.
So, while they may want to pass it this year, we'll see.
We'll see about that.
We'll see. That's all I'm going to say right now, live on Zoom, on YouTube. Okay.